This is Naked by the Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. Brought to you by Vladi and Nektarios Lolios. And remember to subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help us share it with the world. Hey, buddy. Hey, Nektarios.
Hi, Vladi.
Where are you?
I'm at home in London.
Yeah, actually, I can see that. I'm not sure why I asked that. That was a stupid question.
But where
I think
are
I
you?
wanted you to ask me because people don't know where I am. So
I'm not going to ask you. Hi, Vladi. Where are you?
You can see the bunk bed behind me. Guys, you can't see that, but there's something today, So I'm at my parents' place in Slovakia. It's sort of in the middle of nowhere, but in the middle of beautiful mountains. And the one precious thing that I have on my Zoom calls is that I have this bunk bed from, which I share with my sister. I think that's the way you say it in English, right? The double bed.
Yeah.
Bunk bed, yeah. And it's such an icebreaker. Like, people keep asking me about this. Like, is that really where you sleep? And I was like, yeah, still. Anyhow, so how are you?
I'm well. I'm really good.
You're traveling tomorrow, right?
Yes, I'm flying to Greece again.
You're going to Greece.
Yes, so I'm very, very excited. Part family, part work. But there is an irony in this because we actually tried to record this once before, where I had just come back from Greece and it didn't go too well because I was feeling a bit all over the place. Yeah. So much better.
No, I was just about to say that it's good to see you in a good energy, high energy. And guys, this does happen when you record a podcast that you do re-record. We got the feedback from our editor. Hi, Catherine. We love you. That, hey, guys, you just have to re-record this. The energies were not fit in, and we're glad to do it. It's a pretty special episode that we are recording. I mean, we are officially we're off the second season. We haven't been recording for a few weeks. But there was this one gift that we wanted to really give you, which was to look back on our second season. Nektarios, do you want to say a little bit more about what we're doing now?
Sure. So this is a best of episode, which we haven't done before. Woo-hoo. So we thought, as we're getting guests who have really rich and interesting stories, maybe it's a good way to reflect a little bit on what we heard, what we've learned, pick a few nice passages that we enjoyed, but also highlight the different things that we care about at the Future Farm.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much. And frankly, when we were doing the selection, like, we loved all the episodes, so it was quite hard. And then what we tried to do for you guys is to pick parts and highlights of the episode. Even that was hard, not even to pick some of the people, but also within the individual episodes to pick the parts that we liked, and we sort of thought like they had a strong message that we would like to highlight. It's been a very interesting process. I'm glad we've done it. It's been it wasn't straightforward, let's put it that way, but we pushed through, and I'm glad that this small baby is coming to life. I actually wanted to highlight the extra naked. I hope it's not too egocentric, but in terms of that, I felt that it just made for me personally this whole theme and conversation that we have here about mental health even more personal, and I personally found a lot of value in that. I guess in relationship with you, Nektarios, but also sort of the time and space to really properly reflect on the conversation with the guests. It felt more intimate. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. It would be brilliant to get some more feedback from you on Extra Naked. We're certainly planning on also building it for the third season. But that was probably the major highlight for me. But there were many more. But yeah, Extra Naked.
And maybe for context, if somebody's listening for the first time, in our first season, we had our guest episodes and that was it. In our second season, we decided that every week after the guest episode, Vladi and I sit down and reflect on the episode, reflect on the guest, reflect on what we've learned. And also, talk a little bit more about what's going on in our own lives. And it became a bit of a mutual coaching support therapy session, which I thought was amazing. And I really, really loved it, especially because it became much easier for us. Also, I think if somebody listens back to the extra episodes, also a bit more open and a bit more vulnerable than at the beginning. There was a lot of downloading stuff that you don't necessarily share publicly, which some of our listeners said they actually really appreciated. For me, in terms of highlights, it's more, I'm glad that we managed to do something that we're very keen on from the beginning, which is being as diverse as possible when it came to the selection of the guests.
Yeah,
so the fact that we were across ages, across genders, across sexualities, but also different types of entrepreneurs. So people who are not traditional entrepreneurs from the sports world, from the arts world, or kind of the investor perspective, the research and scientist perspective. That makes me very happy. And then this is something we're definitely also very keen to take into the future kind of the Naked podcast, because that's really super important to us in the drive to change the conversation around mental health and entrepreneurship, but also looking at where are the parallels to other high performers, other people who are under extreme pressure and highly visible.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that was the second priority or highlight. So we are in sync. Maybe a last point really before we go into this, like I just want to take a second to really thank to the whole team that is behind this, with Catherine, our editor, with the wider team and Laura helping us to sort of share this to the wider world, and our producer back in Prague. So it would never sort of become what it is without them. And they are part of the creative sort of soul and heart of Naked. So thank you. And with that, yeah, let's just go into it.
So we picked some passages. So what we'll do is we're going to introduce the guest briefly, and then we'll share one of the passages of the conversation we thought was really insightful and useful. Bit of a teaser for people who don't know us, a bit of a reflection for the people who do know us.
Yeah, perfect.
Who should we start with? Who should we start with?
So I want to start on a pretty strong note. I want to start with somebody who does not necessarily tick the box of a conventional entrepreneur, although we already said that we don't have a box for an entrepreneur. She is a double golden medalist. She has many more identities, as you will learn, and her name is Dame Kelly Holmes. And the part that I particularly loved, and why I think that she certainly should be in this highlight best of, is because Kelly not only talked to us about the mental health challenges she experienced as a top athlete, and that was certainly moving and in some way disturbing, intimidating, but the part that we picked was actually about what she called climbing a mountain. And that is really about what a lot of, whether they're top athletes or entrepreneurs or other high performers, experience, which is the sort of clash or questioning of your identity after you meet and reach your big goal. And for her, that was the gold medal. And the question of asking herself, who am I if I'm not the athlete? Who is Kelly? Was a big one. So I hope you will find a lot of value in it. I certainly did. And I know that a lot of people around me who are not top athletes, they find themselves in a job, or they are with their own businesses, and they are thinking about exiting it and plugging it back into life, found a lot of parallel in there. So I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, this is Kelly Holmes.
And the other thing that's very different in sport and business is sport's black and white. You know, you win, you lose. Business has a few more variables of what's means success, you know.
Yeah, hence the question really, because I do remember this story. Ted Turner said the story that when who is the founder of CNN and many other businesses, very sort of well-known, recognized. And he once said the story that he was climbing a ladder in his life, and there was a back at the top of that hill, and he was walking towards getting the back. And when he climbed the hill, opened the back, it was empty. So I was wondering, sort of in reflection of that, when I was just trying to understand the gold medals or the world record, what happens in that moment? And you sort of shared a little bit around now is the moment. I worked hard for this, right? I do deserve this. What else is happening there?
Well, say I suppose after winning the gold medals, like in Athens, there was firstly it was oh my God, I've done it. It's like, kind of the realization that you've done it is massive, as well as the pinch me moments. Like, am I still going to start? I remember coming back home and to the UK, and even 3 months later, we're still a bit mad because I was the first woman ever to win 2 gold medals at any one games. And, I said to my mum, can you just pinch me? Because have I actually done this? I felt like I was going to wake up, and still be on the start line. It was surreal. That's probably the word. It was surreal. When you've worked so hard for something, you don't put yourself in the position of what it's going to feel like when you've done it. So when you've actually done it, when it's that big, it's sort of like, what am I now meant to feel like? Of course, it was just most amazing feeling, the opportunities I got, but equally that bit almost was just a world that you can't ever envisage, and a process you can't envisage. After that, then you start to think to yourself, okay, who am I now? Because once you've reached the top, that you've only focused about the top, you haven't focused on over the top, you haven't focused on behind that mountain as you just described it. You don't focus on that bit, you only focus on getting to the top of the mountain. When you get, and then you're going the opposite side, it's like, well, what's this world? I have no idea now, because now all my dreams have gone, all my aspirations, my fight, my structured life, my environment that I've known every minute of the day is now gone, because now I don't know what I'm going for. That side of it is, I think, the hardest side. Even it was hard getting to the top of the mountain, it's harder to compute the next stage, because do you build another mountain? What's that mountain going to be? Do you start from the hill and look ahead and think, okay, this is where I'm going? But if you don't know where you're going, then what? So then you have all these variables in your mind about who you are. You question, yourself again. You then question your ability to be somebody different, to reshape and reform yourself. And that's what I've had to do the last sort of 15 years.
Well, you kind of introduced another concept, right? Because you actually said, who am I after this, right? So it's all about identity. And we've noticed this a lot with entrepreneurs, is that they are the business and the business is them. And our very first guest on the podcast did actually say verbatim, it's like, well, if I no longer follow this cosmic mission, who am I, right? And because he decided to step back and walk away and go corporate. But it is a really interesting one, because it really kind of, no matter how much achievement you had in your life, and you kind of talked about your confidence, it's sort of, if you start something new, right, how do you translate the achievements? And because if it's starting from the bottom, I'm sure it comes with all the insecurities and the questions. And you've done this now a few times, right?
Yes. Yeah. I feel like I'm in many lives. I'm a cat. Just hope I'm getting to the end yet.
But it's very inspirational, for a lot of people, because as Nektarios is describing, this is indeed what we keep hearing and even ourselves really experiencing, is their rebuild, reboot. So how do you navigate this? What happened after you climbed that mountain in the athletic world?
Yeah.
How did you support yourself in that, what you said, you have to ask yourself the big question?
Yeah. So I suppose it took a long time to reframe my mindset, to not just think that all I have in life is one massive goal and then I go only for that, because that's all I've done. So when I was 14, I wanted to be in the army as a physical training instructor, and I wanted to be an Olympic champion. I joined the army when I was 17, became a physical training instructor when I was 21, left when I was 27 to pursue my athletics career, won 2 gold medals at 34. Like, what I've been doing for 20 years, like that's what I've known. So how do I then suddenly go, oh, now I want to be, it's so hard, you know, so you have to reframe who you are. So some of what's happened, I suppose, I mean, I'd probably say the last 3 years, I've changed and learned the most about myself, which I'll come to in a minute. Like now I can honestly say I know what I want to do and be and how. But that period up to it was very, you know, I was going up and down with emotions. You know, I find something that I'm passionate about, I put all my energy into it, and then realize it's not fulfilling the void, you know. I just do it because I feel like I have to put my mind into something because that's how I've always been. But it wasn't as big or as, you know, rewarding as the other two things. So when I've built it, I still put exactly the same heart and mind and effort in, but the reward's not the same in terms of the feeling. So I was national school. I was like, when I first retired, so one of our prime ministers, Gordon Brown, came into power. And on his first day of being in power, I met him at a charity event. And I just thought, okay, and I don't know why, I just thought, right, I've got to find an opportunity here to speak to him. So I just said, oh, Prime Minister, congratulations. I'd love to come and speak to you. I've got an idea. I mean, I had no idea. I don't even know where it came out of my mouth because I'm not like the most, I am like confident in everything I do when I do it, but I'm not the kind of, look at me person, you know. So I just thought, I want to do it. And anyway, he said, oh, come to my office tomorrow. And I'm thinking, I've got to come up with an idea between today and tomorrow what I want to speak to about. So I just thought to myself, okay, overnight, okay, what can I do? What is the biggest power I've got at the moment is inspiring young people, because I just won 2 gold medals, you know, like just retired, everybody knew me. Okay, so I want to be national school sport champion. I want you to fly me all over the country. I want to inspire the next generation to believe in themselves through sport, because that's how I started, my PE teacher telling me I could be good at something. So he said, yes, love it. And that was it. 3 years, I was national school sport champion, traveling around the country, just inspiring people and things. Then during that time, I suddenly thought to myself, and it's all again starts with the passion, is that I wasn't getting to see areas that really needed support. Like I was going to all the areas in the schools that had the financial backing, that had brilliant facilities, you know, and the kids were loving life and sport. And I was like, well, what about all the ones that are left out? You know, there must be areas of deprivation, areas that actually, if I go in there and talk to them, they could be the next thing. So anyway, I just thought, right, I'm going to start a charity then, because I'd start it because I knew, again, because I'd been to charity since I was 16, that I could make a difference to people's lives, because my PE teacher made a massive difference for mine, believing in me. So I started my charity from nothing, like literally from scratch. And I decided that I wanted to help children of areas of deprivation become somebody through purpose. At the same time, you asked me about this transition bit. There were so many athletes that had put on the same amount of time, effort, years, who had nothing, no platform whatsoever, completely depressed, loss of identity, loss of personality, loss of any direction whatsoever. And I thought, I've got to use the platform I have to help them. So then it was transitioning athletes. So I then, you know, that's now 13 years old, my charity, 400,000 plus young people we've helped, and 750 athletes transitioned. Love it. I was chairing the board. I didn't know how to chair a board. I mean, like, who teaches these things? But it was my charity. I thought, I've got to control it. So I chaired a board with, you know, 10 board members for 8 years, stood down because people were talking about this word, good governance, looked into that. And it's like, you know, don't hang on to something when other people can do better. I thought, okay, so I'll stand down now. I'm president. I was just winging it. I was just literally learning on the job and learning things that I thought, okay. And then I suddenly just sort of had this thing of, I need to find things that, like, that was great. I loved it. And I do love it, of course, my charity. You know, I'm so proud of it. Probably one of the proudest things I've done. But it was almost like, so what's the next thing? And I keep trying to always find the next thing, which people like me is like driven. You either can just go, okay, I'm going to chill out now and do nothing. But like, I don't want to, I want to still learn and thrive. So the past 3 years have been the biggest change for me because my mother passed away, which like literally tore my heart apart. And I thought, she hasn't got another day to live. I want to live like till 100, because I want to keep learning. I want to stay young. I want to whatever. And I thought, okay, so I've got to do more things. So
that was Kelly. Pretty strong. She had this vibrant energy. Like whenever I re-listen to the episode, like I feel like I'm radiant, sort of floating. So here is your turn, Nektarios. Which one would you pick?
I picked Stefan Kollenbach.
Okay.
Stefan Kolenberg is a serial entrepreneur and a mental health advocate. And the reason that episode resonated with me was one of the things we're really keen on is to make sure we help people understand how to recognize when something's wrong. And with Stefan, that was very strong. Just hearing his story on how he went through these ups and downs repeatedly. And this particular segment is about how to listen to the signals of your body. And sometimes they're internal signals, but sometimes it's also other people having to tell you that something's wrong. I really kind of thought that this was important, but also then we talked a little bit more about the tools. What do you use to actually come out of it, right? So once you've identified that something isn't working, self-reflection, scanning yourself, then going, okay, what are the tools that you can use? Overall, one of the things that was particularly poignant for me in that episode, because the episode is all about addiction, was there was an element, a conversation around addiction and substance abuse, which is the more traditional definition of addiction. And then there was a conversation around being addicted to being in a startup and burning yourself out and then going back into the same cycle again and how to break out of it. So that's what resonated with me. And here's Stefan Kollenbach.
I feel like we need to take a deep breath, all of us. Just like, because there's a lot, honestly. Yeah.
Is there a difference between you realizing yourself, I need help, and going to join one of the programs as you did before, or your mates, your co-founders, the people who spend most of the time sitting you down and going, you know what, practically saying, and I'm being provocative here, saying, you've been through this before and you managed to recognize it yourself, but this time we need to tell you because you're not seeing this.
So when I first got clean, I didn't recognize it myself. Actually, with the thing that prompted me, is interesting. This is a great question. The thing that got me to get clean and go to these meetings was that I had one like really, really bad night out. A bunch of stuff happened. Won't get into the details, but it was just a very bad night. My roommates at the time, who I was using with, kicked me out of the apartment. They're like, you can't live here anymore. You have a really bad problem and you need to deal with it. And it was like after the people that I used drugs with were like, dude, you have a problem. You need to like go figure this out. And that woke me up. I was like, oh shit, who am I? Like looking in the mirror, strung out, still super high, and then coming down and being like, what is my life? Like, what am I? Who is this in the mirror? I don't recognize this person. And so it was almost kind of similar where this external thing shocked me because it was like, oh, now my co-founders who I'm building this with, who we're all in this, like invested in this together. The success of it is dependent on like continuing to grow and like be able to raise funding. They're telling me that I should take a break. I'm like, oh, maybe I should take a break. So it's interesting. Like, yes, there was a realization of like, okay, now that I had that external shock, is like, rather than like, there's some, I know some people who have responded to that type of external thing with like, no, fuck you, I don't have a problem. Like, sorry for swearing. And just like, I don't have a problem. I don't need to deal with this. Like, go away. And like, they'll respond like that. So I guess I'll acknowledge that I did have the awareness to be like, yes, okay, I do need to step away. This is like the thing that's like, this is my bottom. Like there's a saying in the program, it's like, your bottom is where you stop digging. And it's like, that was where my bottom was. I chose to stop digging and get help.
How are you today? How are you doing?
That's a good question. I'm doing better. I'm more grounded, more comfortable with and like aware of what I want from life. We were talking before we started recording about the morning routine, and I am loving my morning routine. Like I wake up at like 7ish. I go for a 30 minutes, hour-long walk. I have breakfast. I'll do some like NA step work. I'll go to an NA meeting, and now I'm learning how to dance. And that's
pretty cool.
So I'm just like, I'm finding like my priority for moving forward is like finding joy. It's like, how can I find joy in my life and do the things that I want to do with my life? And so that's been a really powerful sentiment. And it's almost like shifting. It's like, what is the priority? Like, what is that end goal that I want to get towards? And it's kind of shifted. It's more about like, yes, I want to be even more like, yes, I had talked a lot about mental health before. I'd worked a lot on my mental health before, but I was still like, I think there's parts of it where I was still like halfway in. Like I was, yes, like very much into it and like working on therapy, like all of these things. But I think now I'm like fully on board and like continue, like really invested in the program, and I'm seeing all the benefits that it is having for me and continuing to have. And so I feel optimistic about where my life is headed, and the habits that I'm starting to build and the practices I'm starting to build to live a healthier life. And also redefine like what is the goal in life? Is the goal to make money and be successful and blah blah blah?
It feels like a beautiful place to sort of start wrapping up. And I want to just thank you and there was some call for an invite.
That was actually the notification for my NA meeting at 10 a.m.
Okay.
In half an hour.
So you see, I was right. But no, thank you so much. I mean, on a personal level, I wanted to thank you because I was coming, and Nektarios knows because I talked to him before we started recording that today was sort of a tough day for me. And it was related to co-founders and finding my own way. And one thing that you said, which was around that the first step is to admit that you have a problem, felt that it actually lightened up on my end because I think that's where I am also myself. And it sort of feels like you want to tear up even now. But I wanted to thank you for coming, on air and just having this very honest conversations with us. And what a beautiful journey you are on.
So this was Stefan. Who's next for you, Vladi?
I have another outlier of our selection. So he's a leading psychiatrist, academic, and a legend, certainly in my world. His name is Dr. Michael Freeman. And I remember the moment when I read his article that was introducing the relationship between mental health and entrepreneurship. And I also remember the moment when his email came and arrived to our Hello at the Future Farm inbox, and I freaked out and emailed you, and I was like, oh my God, Michael Freeman wrote. But that's not the reason why he's in the best of. We wanted to go much deeper into understanding the relationship between mental health and entrepreneurs and what's really happening for entrepreneurs as a sort of a specific group of people. And is there a predisposition why we picked this profession? What's the DNA relationship to mental health of entrepreneurs? And it's insightful. It talks about the different scale as well as different type of mental health challenges that entrepreneurs go through. So enjoy it. This is Michael Freeman.
It's interesting because you started by saying that when it comes to the manifestation of the mental health problems, challenges, is pretty much the same between entrepreneurs and the rest of the population. I think one of the reasons we're doing what we're doing is because we feel that the stigma attached to it, though, is higher because it sort of stands against the glorification of the risk taker and the achiever and the job creator and the innovator. And have you experienced something similar, or are we here on the wrong path with our assumption?
You're definitely on the right path. The total incidence might be a little bit higher among entrepreneurs. In our most recent study, we found that it was about 38% of entrepreneurs have one or more lifetime psychiatric conditions. whereas for the general population, it's more like 30%. So it might be a little elevated among the entrepreneurs. What's significant, though, is the kinds of mental health issues that entrepreneurs have. And yes, the stigma is, I don't know if the stigma is higher, but the stigma is quite prominent for those people. But also the self-stigma and the self-deprecation and the feeling of needing to kind of hide something about who you really are, and the feelings of shame that go with that. And for many entrepreneurs, this starts very early in life. If you look at the data on ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, for example, that's one of the conditions that's very, very common among entrepreneurs, much more common among entrepreneurs than it is with the managers and the employees. Those kids with ADD grew up being criticized, being blamed, being embarrassed, being shamed. And by the time they get to be young adults, they already have low self-esteem. And so when you go from being a kind of a disruptive adolescent with ADHD who's getting thrown out of your class and is getting, good enough grades but not living up to your potential, and you're the class clown and a troublemaker and disruptive, and the system is telling you that you're a problem. And then fast forward 10 years later, you're building a business, you've created 20 jobs, you hired all of the A students from the class you got kicked out of to help you. You're the same disruptive kid, but now as a disruptor, you're looked at in a totally different way, but you as a person haven't changed. So when you overlay this kind of the stigma and the negative images on these entrepreneurs, it's touching on something that they're already from childhood set up to be particularly sensitive to. And I think that part of it contributes to the culture of entrepreneurship. Among entrepreneurs, if you talk to founders, what you often hear is, we're crushing it and we're killing it and we're knocking it out of the park and everything is great and the world loves our product, and it's kind of hyperbolic. There's an exaggerated sense of success and enthusiasm that gets projected in a way. I feel like for many people that's kind of covering over and filling this vacuum of low self-esteem that kind of people bring with them on this journey to entrepreneurship.
I was actually interested too. Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Well, I was going to say the reality is a lot of entrepreneurs are otherwise unemployable, and they don't want to hold a job and they can't hold a job, and so you can imagine what that does, the emotional impact of that. One guy told me that he's a serial entrepreneur, and he says the entrepreneurs, we live in the remote suburbs of cities that we want to improve and empower to succeed, where we'll never be accepted as citizens.
That's a beautiful visualization of what you just said, right? It's that unemployability people sometimes mention, right? And sometimes it's a quip, it's a joke. I can't help just look at my own path. And I was such a fully functioning employee. And I was very happy to submit to the corporate structures. And then when I left that world and I look back, I really can't imagine going back. So there is something about this, having crossed that path where you recognize the possibilities of the risk taking and the beauty of unemployability. But that's an aside. I know that Vladi had a
sense
question.
Of freedom that goes with it.
And ownership.
And ownership, yes. And the creativity and the ability to sort of imagine and direct your own future rather than following the steps up the ladder in a corporation.
Michael, the new fact for me today from what you shared versus what I sort of was keeping in my mind when I also read the study is that I was with the assumption that what differentiates the entrepreneurs big time in terms of the mental health is the scale. So it was the 72% of entrepreneurs compared to general public, right? So that was sort of the data point that I was working with.
It's there's a little nuance because what the study found is that 72% of entrepreneurs are affected by mental health directly or indirectly. So what that means is if you're an entrepreneur, there's a conservative, realistic 38% likelihood that you have one or more diagnosable mental health conditions. But if you look at the first degree family members, the parents, the siblings, and the children of entrepreneurs, what you find is an elevated level of mental health issues in the nuclear family, in the close families. And so why that's relevant is that the mental health conditions are associated with superpowers, with traits that allow entrepreneurs to succeed. And it often turns out that the entrepreneur has a more severely mentally ill sibling or parent or child, and that the entrepreneur kind of inherited like just the right amount of energy, just the right amount of extroversion, just the right amount of creativity, just the right amount of curiosity, just the right amount of open-mindedness to be very good at entrepreneurship, but that other people in the family have too much, and they have levels of symptoms that cause disabilities rather than driving the success. And so entrepreneurs, even if you're an entrepreneur with no mental health issues whatsoever, highly likely that somebody very close to you does have a mental health problem, and that you've lived your entire life with a disabled sibling, or with a parent who's an alcoholic, or with a kid who's in a special needs school someplace. So it's really this bigger context. That's the 72%. It's that the entrepreneurs live in this world of just a different mental health perspective.
So we've got a little bit of psychology with Michael Freeman, and now we are going a little bit in the similar space, but introducing Nektarios. Who's our next best of?
Our next guest is Noah Matz. Noah Matz is a psychiatrist, but also the operating partner at F2 Venture Capital in Israel. I was really intrigued when I was introduced to Noah, because you don't see very often that a venture capital firm, a VC fund, is hiring a psychologist to be a partner. And it was one of those moments where we had the first conversation. There was, again, so much energy in the room, but also finding out how a VC, this particular VC, looks at the engagement with startups, their responsibility and duty of care towards the companies that they invest in. So they've created this playbook, and it's really a lot of the conversation, in particular this passage, is about the playbook and questions that a VC would ask about psychology of the founders. We also talk a little bit about the Israeli ecosystem, which for me was quite interesting because I've worked a lot with Israeli founders. So that was a very rich episode. So here's Noah Matz.
One of the problems is for VCs, they feel uncomfortable to ask those kind of questions for founders.
Is it also because there's an assumption that when you talk about mental stuff, people always think, oh, I need to sit them down and ask them, have you ever experienced anxiety and depression? All right. And because your questions are ultimately, when you read the questions in your playbook, they're very logical questions. How did you deal with a difficult situation? That sort of thing, right? Ultimately, it's very common sense. So yeah, please tell us more about what it actually means that you're asking the founders. How do you translate that fear of mental stuff into something very practical and very kind of concrete?
Mm-hmm. So first and foremost, again, to give credit to the ecosystem that have been progressing on this note, feeling more comfortable discussing those aspects. The idea is to take questions like, can I give an example from the playbook?
Go for it, yeah, absolutely.
So ask questions like, provide me an example for a situation where you were heavily disappointed, hurt, or distressed by someone or something. Describe the chains of events. What happened? What followed those situations? So in this question, we're trying to understand, how do the founders react when something bad happens? How do they deal with failure? And this question can be rephrased in all kinds of ways, to be adequate for a business conversation. For example, the founder can share with us a previous failure. He can say, many times we meet founders of companies that closed the previous company. The startup did not succeed. They had to close. Now they're in their second trial. We will ask them, what happened there? He will share about, or she will share about the failure. And then I would offer the VC to ask, how was it like for you? How did you deal with it? Or even say, just put it on the table. It probably was a huge disappointment for you. It probably was a lot of grief. We know that there's post-startup grief. It was probably very hard for you. And then to see what comes out of it. What does the founder share with us? Just to provide a door to this kind of conversation that doesn't have to be very heavy.
How founders usually react to this when you ask those questions during due diligence process?
Well, first, it's inconvenient at the beginning. It's very important for me. As I said, I'm in the founder side. So I understand that a team that is coming for me for a due diligence, for a meeting with me, first, they're stressed, because when you see a psychologist, the first thing you think is they're analyzing me. So I understand that they're a bit stressed and they don't know what to expect. And I also remember that I will want to work with this team. They're going to be a portfolio company, and I want to be their wingman. I want to be their first phone call. I have to remember that in our conversation and make sure that they feel comfortable with me. Also, another role that I take in investment committee meetings, which are very stressful for founders, is to be that person that is smiling to them, that is opening the door smiling to them, that is asking them something to drink. How do you feel today? How are you? And I feel like the team is, we say in Hebrew, they need bak. They see me, how I do it, and they started to do the same. Being friendly for the founders, and also founder friendly is one of our mottos. Making them feel comfortable. It's okay. And when they're comfortable, they're better. Yes, Nektarios.
So I realize that I'm shifting, I'm leaning in, and it's
Yes.
kind of funny when you talk about body language, because in some conversations, I'm sort of comfortable in my chair, but now I'm sort of anxious to come in, and I probably look scary on the screen.
No, you don't. I just understand that you want to say something.
Vladi sort of took it down a particular path about how do founders react. And for me, this might be a little bit of a detour, but I feel we need to talk about this. Because you are in the Israeli ecosystem, and let's not pretend Israeli founders have a reputation, right? There's attitude, there's confidence, and there is also, let's also bring gender into this, right? Because there is this heavy weighting towards male founders in a lot of countries that I've worked with. And my experience from Israel is also that there is no balance. There's no real gender balance in the terms of the ecosystem, right? So how much does culture and gender play into your experience? Is it something where you need to adapt to be extra kind of Israeli minded, or do you think this is universal and it can be applicable to different scenarios?
It's a very good question. Well, I work with 95% male. Aside of our team that is 50-50 with our magnificent ladies in F2, I work with mostly male founders. And I can even say I feel like I'm not even sure I know how to work with female founders. I'm not sure. I have to experience that. I think I've worked with 2 female founders, and it's very different. The Israeli founder has his reputation, and he justifies this reputation daily. And we see it everywhere. But in the beginning, when we meet them, the pre-seed stage, even the most confident ones, because they're out of their comfort zone, we meet them in the areas where they're not as confident.
It's a power dynamic. We have to be also clear about that, right? I mean, the founder coming into the investor, and I think there is a minority of them that they have the mindset that this is a game of 2. I'm coming in here to choose. Most of them come with, I'm either going to be selected, right? I'm going with an ask. So I guess the power dynamic plays to it, but please go on.
Yes, you are very much right. And even the strongest ones, we had a situation lately with 2 very dominant founders, came from maybe the strongest intelligence, the army unit, were very much courted by all VCs. And we were a bit in awe with their way of presenting themselves, a bit arrogant and cocky. And by doing the work with them along the path and getting to know them from references that I've been talking to, I've realized that they're lacking confidence. It was a manifestation of lacking confidence. They are confident individuals, they are. But in this situation, I feel in the pre-seed stages, they are all lacking confidence.
So this was Noah Matz from F2 Ventures. Now, your last choice, Vladi.
Yeah, so I'm glad we're staying with the women gang. The other best of is from a very different angle. She's not an entrepreneur per se, although we arrived in our conversation to alignment that she is. And this is again where sort of our narrative around that there is no one sort of box for entrepreneurs, it came up because one of the angles that has been very important for us is looking also on activists and people who drive movements and also leaders of organizations like non-governmental organizations. And a lot of times those people have to drive them as businesses. So one of such role models, and she has her absolute place here in our best of Naked, is Leila Hussein. She's an activist, a serial entrepreneur. She has many more identities, and the one she introduced herself with was a change agent. And I think it belongs to her beautifully. And what she talks about, and where I like this highlight, is the power of voice and a platform and narrative that we have as entrepreneurs and people that other people sort of look up to us. And she talks about as an activist, you also have to take care of your mental health. You have to forget very often your ego, and I love that about this highlight. She talks about it and how surrounding yourself with the best team is the way forward. So it's a little different angle to the mental health, but certainly a strong one. This is Leila Hussein.
Leila, so you are driving this systemic change from different places. Mm-hmm. And we sort of lived through this ourselves with Nektarios and our team. I'm seeing every day number of entrepreneurs that have a cause they devoted their life to and want to drive it from a systemic lens. Mm-hmm. What do you feel are sort of the essentials for that movement to be effective? Like, what is it, everything that needs to be sort of considered? And I know that this maybe is the theoretical question, but I'm asking because I know that you use also the power of the word and the narrative, right? You write for a lot of media. I mean, you have an organization that is focused on intervention. So you sort of come in different places of the value chain or how do you sort of drive the movement? So what are your thoughts? What's sort of the learned experience from your own journey?
mean, currently working on this Africa-led movement, hence why I'm actually in Kenya. What I've learned being involved in this process, it's one to check your ego, that you're not the one with the answers all the time. I think it's bringing the right partners together is important, who can fit, who can provide that level of expertise, the areas that you don't have. So for me, that's really important, because usually founders get in that space of the ego. Well, you know, I know what's best. And actually, what I learned as a founder, as someone who's led teams, is actually getting a team that makes me look great. Really, I think with any movement, I think it's recognizing if we were creating a whole brand new movement right now. As a founder, who I want this new movement. So what's the first I think of? Like, what outcome do I want from this? A, B, C. Who can provide A for me? Who can provide B for me? So for me, actually working, bringing your team together, it's key, super key. But in that space, you need to check your ego all the time. We all have ego, by the way. It's a normal human, reaction, but it's constantly checking it. But trust. I know this might sound very cheesy. I think trust is very key when in terms of approach, because there's nothing worse when you're trying to achieve something. Or currently, I'm part of the team who's supporting an existing movement. And actually, one of my colleagues said to me, we've got this big meeting coming up in April. What do you want to achieve? I said, I wanted us to achieve a level of trust within, because there's 6 organizations working together. We need to, I say, if we get that, if we have a level of trust between us, everything will fall into place. And to do that, you have to do the work, especially I'm part of the team that's leading this consortium right now. So and we need to set the tone in a lead up to this meeting in April, that we are we are facilitating a trusting space. So to me, that's really key. I mean, listen, I didn't even know I was the social entrepreneur until someone said it to me, because I worked in a space of development. And it was only 2-3 years ago. It was David Rowan, who was the founder of Wired magazine, who I met in different spaces. And then someone else who said, Lily, you're a social entrepreneur. And I'm like, oh, I thought that was a whole different ball game. I didn't know I was doing that. So sometimes you don't even know that these titles. So I felt for a while I didn't even belong, even though I was in these spaces, but somehow I didn't even have the right terminology for it, because I never made the connection. Because in my mind, a social entrepreneur is someone who went to a business school, who developed, who might have worked in Microsoft at some point. Like it's that. So it's great that we're retelling these stories in different ways now. But it needed someone to step in as well to say, hey, actually, did you know this is what you're actually doing? I'm like, oh. And then it was David Rowan who invited me to that whole space where I met Julia, then Matteo, then to you. So it's important. So now I step in for people who don't even know that they're in that space. Like, did you know this is what you're doing?
But you know what? I sometimes feel like the words are so limiting in terms of the boxes they put us in, because even now, Leila, when you said like, he told you you're a social entrepreneur. So my whole body reacted, because I was like, no, she's an entrepreneur, or she's a change agent who uses, she has an entrepreneurial mindset to what she does and how she runs it. So, but Leila, I love the fact that we actually sort of ended on this note, because I from my space where I sit here in Lahore on this chair, I do reflect on, how you sort of named yourself. And when you said like, what do I do? I'm a change agent or change maker. And I feel that it so very much reflects a lot of entrepreneurs' journey. And I've been really enjoying this conversation so thank you for not tiptoeing and for the straightforwardness.
Thank you.
Okay, so we learned something about the managing our egos. And here we come with our last best of candidate.
So I picked James Rutledge. James is the founder of Sanctus, which is a mental health organization providing support in the workplace. And the reason that episode particularly resonated with me, one, well, there were few, but the episode was important to me because I've been through a similar process of stepping down or stepping aside from my role as a CEO. In James's episode, what was really interesting, especially the passage we picked to highlight, was what does he use? He talks about therapy. We talked about the journaling that is introduced on the Sanctus platform. We talk about how being a CEO could be feeling trapped. And it was also important for me to share this one because a lot of people afterwards who are founders kind of came back and saying, this really resonates with me. There's moments where I feel I want to run away and I can't because I'm leading this. So hopefully people will find some solace and some inspiration in that episode. So here's James Rutledge.
Like I was talking to my therapist a couple of days ago. For me, that's my tool, my main tool. And I was talking about how I realized that my social influencer currency has dropped. The value of the currency has dropped. I just don't have the same impact that I used to have. And I still go back into this place where I go, what does this mean? And bizarrely, I had read your latest newsletter, and at the bottom you write what you read, what you listen to, and you mentioned Eckhart Tolle. And I hadn't come across Eckhart Tolle before. And whilst I was talking to my therapist, she just lifts this book, and it's an Eckhart Tolle book, and I was like, oh, this is a bit too much of a coincidence. So anyway,
yeah,
deviating.
Well, I mean, just to jump in, I mean, the thing I've not mentioned there is that preceding this is 18 months of therapy as well, which I think is not to be ignored, because that I started going to therapy at a time when I was running the business, and I was happy to be running it. Yeah, I was very stressed, and I was thinking about work all the time, like completely consumed by Sanctus. And it's as if I couldn't turn off. Like no matter how hard I tried, I just had this constant cycle of thoughts, worries, questions, overgoing conversations I should have had with the team, things I could have said, just constant noise. And I had a moment lying in bed one night. This was just before I entered therapy, so this was a couple of years ago. I basically thought to myself, God, if this continues, I don't even want to like get up in the morning. Like I just don't. And that thought really scared me, because working in mental health, right? We talk a lot about suicide and suicidal ideation. And I thought, you know what, gosh, that's not far off a suicidal thought, basically. You know, it's not. I'm not planning how to take my own life, but I'm thinking I don't really want to wake up in the morning. I was like, that's not great. And it's as if something popped. And so I remember going to therapy, and my first session, my therapist, he ended like his closing line was kind of like, I'm wondering who you are without your business. And I remember just being like, that is exactly why I'm here. And so that was 18 months of work, really, which ended, I remember when it ended, but proceeded last year. And I think that definitely gave me the foundation again to be able to go on this, to go on that letting go journey. Because I don't think I was resilient enough for it before. I was literally Sanctus was too much of a big part of me. And without it, I don't think I felt able to not have it, basically.
Yeah, I'd love for us, James, to actually unpack what you sort of now say with a sort of a feeling of lightness, like being light. It feels light, the inner work.
I mean, the therapy I find is very difficult to quantify and explain, but that was about bringing to life all these different parts of myself that weren't coming to life at work. Like I was going to work and I was just being James, the CEO. And that almost became an ego. It's like I became like a caricature of myself. Like I just had this one side. And there was lots of other parts that were just being, left, you know, the part of me that was deeply worried, right? Like scared, lonely, all this stuff. And in therapy, you know, a lot of stuff from the past, childhoods, family stuff that had just been unexplored and hard to even explain. I don't even know how that was holding me back. It just was. I honestly, it's difficult to even, it's so difficult to even link it. So moving through a lot of that in therapy. And even now therapy feels like the gift that keeps on giving. I'm like 2 years later and I'm remembering conversations, and it's like a muscle or something that continues to grow. Coaching was a little bit different. It was most of my coaching was very specifically on my challenges within Sanctus and my leadership challenges in particular, and that was incredibly supportive. And then and then again, the most helpful things were then just that. Well, the support network with Sarah, my girlfriend, and George, my co-founder, and my mate. They were like crutches, really. You know, they're just like, they were like hearing me and just holding me up at times. I'd say actually the biggest piece of, other than the coaching and therapy, which is, you know, that's like going to the gym. You know, you're getting in there and you're having conversations, and that can be quite tiring. And then you're leaving, and I'm like, what have I just done? I feel worse than when I went in, and it's difficult to sometimes make the link between what you're doing in coaching or in therapy and to your sort of the content of your life situation. But some of the things that actually made the biggest impact and that I look on now are were like doing other stuff in my life. I know it sounds so basic, but like I was giving all of myself to my work that I just wasn't exploring the rest of my life, like hobbies, my relationship with Sarah, my family, my friends. And the more I sort of actually invested in those areas of my life, my ability to let go of Sanctus became much easier, because to let go of my work when work is all I've got feels really scary. But to let go of my work when I've got other threads in my life or other stuff that define a part of my identity or are still going to be mine afterwards, it kind of makes it a lot easier. So like little things, like I remember it sounds hilarious, but I remember getting a bike in London being like a massive thing. It's like, I'm actually going to get a bike and I'm actually going to cycle around, and this is actually going to be something for me, and I'm going to like grow by doing this. Or start writing poetry. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to spend a bit of time, I'm going to write some poetry and maybe I'll share it. Just like doing stuff that was actually for me that I wanted to do, that wasn't constantly just serving my professional self. Because I was doing so much that was just serving me at work constantly, like holidays. A holiday was just a chance for me to recuperate so I could go back and do more work. Yeah. It wasn't a holiday. It was a recuperation and energy restore so I could go and just do more.
But there are those thoughts in my mind as I'm listening to James, because it sort of sounds as if we are saying that, because I'm trying to connect it back to the steps you've took, right? And which was stepping aside as CEO, and now hearing, that was this sort of a struggle to balance and create a space for getting to know yourself fully. And I can imagine then some of the people who are listening to us, you could connect the dots as if being a CEO equals not being able to sort of have it all. And I don't like the have it all sort of metaphor, but what does that mean? What are we saying here?
Some people love being a CEO. They love it.
Yeah.
And that for them is their place in a business. It just wasn't mine. And it's kind of as simple as that, really, I think. There are many founders that are the CEO of their business, and I'm sure they absolutely love it and they're completely fulfilled because they enjoy the practice of being a CEO and what that job entails. I didn't enjoy that. Like, if you wrote down the CEO job title, there's absolutely no way I'd apply for that job. You couldn't pay me £1 million a year. You couldn't pay me anything to do it, because, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I wouldn't do a job in HR or in finance. Well, I don't want to do it. It's just that simple, really. The CEO is an interesting one, because it holds such a cultural weight. Like, everyone basically thinks being a CEO is just fucking cool.
Mm-hmm.
Films,
it's a pride, yeah.
It's like it's a massive status symbol. But if you forget that, if you didn't call it CEO, if you just blanked out the role title and just wrote down the bullet points of what the actual day-to-day job is, there's just no way I'd apply for that. I just don't think just doesn't suit me, and I don't actually think I'm that good at. I actually don't think I'm that good at it. So it's kind of that simple, really.
So this was James Rutledge, and links to all the episodes can be found in the show notes on the episode page on thefuturefarm.co.
Yeah, this was good, man. It's like, I have a good feeling about this. Re-listening and reconnecting with the different stories. It's interesting that even, you do it a number of times, and you guys probably can imagine that we have re-listened to a number of times. You can still find some value in there, like a bit that I was like, oh, I didn't know about this, or I haven't listened to this particular. So hope you enjoyed it, and there was you found some value in it. Give it some love. Share it with people you have in your close or wider environment and community, and people that you think could use it in a happy or a lower moment.
And also give it some love on social media.
True.
Share, review, rate, all the things we need from you, because we really want to get the word out. The more ratings and the more reviews we have, the more it becomes visible to a wider audience. So every like is appreciated.
And the last bit I want to mention, we also have our new form reboot of newsletter out there. So go on the futurefarm.co and sign up to our newsletter. Every month we're getting sort of some updates from the world of entrepreneurs and mental health. There are some practical tools as well. So beyond the podcast, this is another place where you can connect to us. And that's it. I guess we'll see you in our 3rd season.
Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for being part of the Future Farm family. Thank you for supporting what we do and being part of our movement. And yes, not long until season 3.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Naked by The Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. To learn more about our work, sign up to our newsletter or visit thefuturefarm.co, where you can also apply to be a Naked guest. And remember, subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help share it with the world.